It's your host, Dr. Introspect, and I am back. So, today we are going to be talking about Avatar, the live adaptation, per my title and per the thumbnail. That word did not come to my mind for some reason. And as you know, I'm not going to be doing any editing on this video. It's going to be free flow, and so I apologize for some pauses or or anything like that you're not used to from my previous videos. And if you want to know why, you can see my last video and you know how this channel is going to be moving forward and why it's like this right now. And so with that said, we're talking about Avatar today. And first question I want to pose to you guys is not whether you liked this movie, but more so, what do you think the purpose of live adaptations are? If you already know the story and you've seen it before, why does it matter if what you're seeing now is not an exact replica of something you've already seen before? What's the point of that? If you have any thoughts of that, share that in the comments. For me personally, I'm not looking for exact replicas of stories I already know. And maybe that's because I'm not someone that sees movies repetitively. I see it usually just once and I move on to something new and something else. And so when I come into the story and they take a different angle, I'm more inclined to appreciate that and take it for what it is and see it as a separate story from the original. Okay? And I feel like if you decide to take that route, then you have to really create a compelling narrative that supplements the thing that already exists. And so here, I should also say, if you don't like spoilers, maybe go and see this adaptation and then come back and then carry on. But if you don't mind spoilers and you're like me, then we can just carry on and that's fine. Oh, God. Okay. So, uh, okay. So, if you don't like spoilers, you're not going to like this. Watch it, come back, and then we can go from there. So the question I asked about the purpose of live adaptations, are they necessary? Are they a cheap cash grab? Is it uninspired? Should people be writing new stories instead of just remaking old ones? And how has Netflix taken on this challenge? I should also note that in this analysis, I'm not going to be doing a movie review. I'm not going to be analyzing the CGI, the graphics, the effects. I'm not going to be looking at things like the cinematography, the acting, who had more emotions and displays of emotions in their acting, what was believable and what wasn't. I am going to be doing more so an analysis of the plots, the thematic analysis, the messaging, the storytelling behind the story, and the lessons we can take away from there. Because that's what we do on the Introspect channel, okay? And so some of the key areas I'm going to be looking at is the relationships of the different characters. And I think that this is how Netflix wanted to bring their own spin to the story. So in the cartoon, bear in mind the age group of the people watching these cartoons were between, they were 5, they were 7, they were 8, they were 9, up until 15, 16 at the time, maybe older as well. But nonetheless, you're not going to explore some depths of emotion, things like grief, things like loss, things like depth. It's going to be more so action focused, like many animes are, and action packed. And then the sequence of the stories continue. But here, Netflix has really expanded on certain relationships, how they came to be, how certain characters are the way they are, and philosophies. So for me, this story was more so a philosophical dimension level of Avatar. Okay, it's not like action sequences, CGIs, graphics. Oh wow, Aang is so strong. He was able to do this and do that. It's none of that. And if that's what you're expecting in this series, you're going to be sorely disappointed, at least in this first iteration, season one. And yeah, a lot of people were disappointed that he never bended water. Even I was disappointed. A lot of people felt like the pacing was too slow, it was unnecessarily drawn out. Those are some of the feedback I've gotten so far. And there's also feedback about the sequencing of the stories. So certain things were merged into one episode, whereas in the cartoon, maybe they were like a whole season or several episodes together. Or maybe something that is in season one actually happened in season two. Certain people that are involved in certain, scenes are not necessarily depicted that way or not even involved in the cartoon. So if you're very attached to that level of um, precision, you might not like how it's rendered here in the story. But like I said in my earlier disclaimer, I interpret these two as two separate stories. So I'm taking this Netflix thing for its own thing. So I'm going to start off with the philosophical analysis. So among the various themes that are explored in this story, uh, I feel like this is really a philosophical story, and that's why even though we see some fighting scenes here and there, when you listen to the dialogue and you see the themes behind what we're seeing on the screen, you realize that yes, it's like you're sitting in a philosophy class. So some of the themes are things like responsibility, things like what it means to do the right thing, what is right and what is wrong, things like change, evolving. And I'd say there's some other things, but these three ones really stood out to me. And so, with regards to the theme of responsibility, that's pretty much the whole thing of the avatar. What it means to be the avatar, what it means to carry this burden on your shoulder. And people were like, oh my God, they can't stand the number of times Aang is talking about his responsibility. And I'm like, yes, because you're watching this cartoon and you see him springing into action and fighting and all of these things, but it completely skips over how someone that is 12 years old comes to, you know, the resolution of understanding that they are carrying this burden for their lifetime. And per the movie, in the live adaptation, the moment he hears this, the Fire Nation attacks his people. So he doesn't even have the time to process. And then he goes into that freezing state for 100 years. And now he's woken up and he is still the avatar. He still has to carry this burden. And what we are in essence watching happen for him is we are watching Aang process the responsibility of being the avatar. Okay? So before you get angry that he did not do some of the magical things the avatar can do in the cartoons, realize when you were 12, what were you like? And did you even have any concept of the understanding of responsibility beyond keeping your shoes in the right place? Were you even doing your own laundry? And now you have a boy that's supposed to save the world, and everything is on his shoulders. And he doesn't even know how to go about that, right? Because he hasn't even mastered the other bending. All he has done up to this point is learn how to control his power so that it doesn't affect the people close to him. It doesn't harm them. It doesn't harm the nearest and dearest. So, learning how to contain his power has been what he had been doing for 12 years. But now he has to will that power, master the elements. And I think the biggest thing about being an avatar is not that you have this four powers and you're skilled, but the decision process, right? Knowing when to intervene. Responsibility is huge with Avatar because even in the Legend of Korra, you see that theme as well. It was explored a little bit, but it was done more so here. And I think Korra was a lot older than Aang. So, how does Aang, a 12-year-old boy that has lost all of his family, that only knows how to bend air at this time, and everybody here is he is the avatar, and they have this picture, this idealized image of who the avatar is based on who other avatars have been. And you hear the avatar is coming to your town and is coming to save you, and you see this small boy that doesn't even know how to bend other things, but then the responsibility of the whole world is on his shoulders. So take a step back and think about that, and maybe you can appreciate why he talks about the responsibility so much. Okay. Another person that really reflects this element of responsibility is Sokka. So Sokka is from the Water Nation, um, and Sokka, his father left him with the responsibility to care for the Water Tribe, and you see that a lot in him. Um, how he is so, you know, protective of his people, protective of his one and only surviving sibling, his sister. There's just a lot of that going on with him, right? Um, I'm not going to dwell too much on that right now because there's another aspect I want to talk on with regards to soccer, and so I'll leave that there for now. The other thing that was a significant philosophical theme was the concept of goodness, right and wrong, what it means to do the right thing, and making tough decisions. I think this was really explored when the avatar is dueling Boomy. That whole duel of Boomy and the avatar, who Boomy was the, should I say, ruler of the town, that earthbender town that Aang was captured in. He really wanted to help Aang see that as an avatar, or as anyone with power at all, as anyone that has to make tough decisions, you're going to make tough decisions. And it's very hard to say there is this objective good if someone still suffers. If you take the last of the food to give the soldiers instead of the civilians still die. Some people still die. People that are good people that don't deserve to die, and sometimes you can't save everyone. And that's what happens in times of war. And seeing as Aang is going to go against a Fire Nation, it's going to be war. And is he prepared for that? And he is an old man, right? He has seen life, Boomy, and he has made tough decisions, and I'm sure lived with some regrets. And I'm sure he lives with some regrets. And here is Aang, still a 12-year-old boy with so much optimism, so much wide eyes, children that believe they can go to the moon. That's the kind of eyes, mind's eyes, that Aang is bringing to the world. Aang is so naive. He's naive enough to believe he can do something, that he can change something. in the world as he is. And I think when you reflect on life as it is, you do see that in many ways, right and wrong is not so black and white. There are a lot of gray lines. People do get hurt, and there are tough choices that have to be made. You also see the concept of this, um, I don't know, I'm trying to think. So now we're going to move on to the other theme. The other theme I want to talk about is the theme of the code and the code of conduct. I see that a lot with the Fire Nation. And in this story, the Fire Nation is like this very big bad villain, right? But within that system, there's this code. There's this code of how things are done, of the structure, of order, and the rules. And you see that. I found it very interesting how um, Zuko wasn't comfortable with gossip. He doesn't like this other person that is a general in the Fire Nation, and he doesn't like him. But at the same time, he's not okay with his subordinates speaking ill of this person through gossip in a way to ingratiate Zuko, in a way to make him feel better. He doesn't condone it, you know. And even though he doesn't agree with what his father is doing, he still, in a way, still thinks the should I say the goal is justified. So the means maybe he doesn't agree with, but the goal itself is justified. So there's this air of code in the story, and there's that air with Zuko, and it really gave this Netflix's Zuko a different kind of air to him. You know, definitely different from what you're used to in the cartoons. Very very different because I would say because I think in the cartoon, the Zuko is very flighty, he's very hot tempered, can be ill mannered, just really a fire. And here, I don't see a red hot Zuko, I see a blue flame Zuko. And there's going to be more on that later on. But yeah, those are the themes. And I think the last one is the change. So with the Water Nation especially, there's this emphasis of change. They tell you the water is all about change. It's all about ebb. It's all about flow. It's all about moving with things. But then there's that juxtaposition of the Water Nation holding on to these old traditions that do not serve any purpose, especially in their current times. And in this story, it was with regards to women fighting. The women were left to be in the back, being the healers. In the water tribe, the water it has this healing component to it. And that's all the women were meant to do, while the men fought in battle in the front. And some people will argue it's probably elements of feminism in there as well, in many ways. Some people will argue that, and more on that as we go on, but it's definitely something I saw. I don't think there's any other more explanations to put there. Um, Water is about change, moving forward, being adaptable, but the Water Nation had been holding on to old traditions that weren't serving them and they needed to let go. Now, I want to talk about some of the emotional themes that were explored here. So, there were three levels of emotional themes that I came across in the story, and they were more so focused on relationships and traumas. And I know I'll always find an angle to talk about trauma in storytelling. Hollywood stories have been doing a lot of that lately, so it gives us this avenue to really explore that. And so, among the emotional themes, we have two relationships that I thought were worth exploring, and then we have past trauma. And so the first relationship I want to talk about is Iro and Zuko. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, whether it's Iro or Iro or Ira. I can't remember right now, but Zuko and his uncle. They have the father and son dynamic that Zuko never had. And I thought that that was interesting that Zuko's father did not give him the kind of, he wasn't the father figure that he needed. And he found that in his uncle Ira instead. In fact, I would argue that his uncle would be more so willing to give up his life for his nephew than his own father would. And I think the two of them, I don't know what their relationship was like before, you know, Ira came back from battle and he was somber and he was grieving his son, and you know, the two of them went on Zuko's exile mission. I don't know what their dynamic was like because it wasn't shown to us in the story, and we are only talking about Netflix's story. And so I can only comment on what I can see. And it does seem like the both of them are grieving a loss. Zuko is grieving, like they're grieving two absent people, two significant people in their lives that happen to be absent. And for Ira, it's his own son. His own son died and he lost his son. And for Zuko, even though his father is not dead, the relationship does not exist because there isn't that fatherly attachment to his father in the sense of like love. There is an attachment from pain, there's an attachment from longing, there's an attachment from wanting to finally be accepted by him, wanting to earn his um, like perform for his father to accept him and see him as worthy. Um, and the two of them come together, and it's such a beautiful relationship they have. Um, and that is something I think this adaptation brought to the table, the depth of their relationship. And there's so many ways we see it when Ira thinks that Zuko won't make it on a trip, or he is died, or he thinks he died, or he thinks, even aside from like the dangers, there's also the fatherly advice, you know, the sounding board, the person he can speak to freely about anything. There is a level of vulnerability that they both share that I found so endearing to watch. And maybe because it's two men, because it's not uncommon to see a mother and daughter share that kind of bond in storytelling on television, but to see between a man and another man, you know, a young boy like Zuko, it touched my heart a lot. It did. I just cannot deny it. It did touch my heart a lot. And I'm grateful that Netflix brought that dimension to its storytelling. The other relationship was Aang and Gyatso. And Gyatso was like, in the story, Aang calls him his friend, but Gyatso is an old man. And to me, he was like the father figure. Gyatso is the one that tells Aang that he now has to be the avatar and, you know, take up on that burden. And Aang is overwhelmed by it and he runs away to cool his head. And then his home is attacked by the Fire Nation and all of that. In the cartoon, you know, they replicate the scene from the cartoon where Aang sees the skeleton of Gyatso and he's able to recognize the burnt skeleton of Gyatso because of the necklace that he had on. And the scene is very brief in the cartoon, because again, it's a cartoon. Cartoons are known to do emotional bypass and skipping things like death and sorrow and grief because kids don't want to watch that. And a lot of them are too young to even understand the depth of that emotion. So I really appreciated Netflix showing us the depth, with Yatso being his anchor when he went into the spirit world, and the amount of rage, because Aang is such a very calm person. He's an airbender, but he also has the personality of an airbender in the sense that he is avoidant of conflict. He is calm, he is cool, he has a bubbly personality, he's cheerful, he's likable, he's amiable. But see him get so angry that the airbending, from the anger and frustration he saw from seeing his home destroyed and seeing the skeleton of his dear dearest person, caused him to create like a tornado type of thing. And it took really, really, you know the intercession of Zuko and his sister to really get him to, Katara, to get him to calm down. I thought there was a lot of emotion there. I just thought so, because if he didn't care so much, he wouldn't react that way. And this is someone that is usually calm, and he was letting go in that moment because of the level of depth of that relationship and what it meant to him. The cartoon doesn't explain this, but in this adaptation, we can see the depth of the pain and how that caused him to lose control. And finally, the other emotional theme is the exploring of past traumas. So when they are trapped in the spirit world, we are made to understand that in the spirit world, people get trapped there, and they are often trapped in nightmares of their own making. Um, we are led to understand that you can uncover shadows of yourself here, aspects of your memories that you suppress, that you're in denial of, or maybe you are, but you haven't confronted them, or maybe they cause you so much pain, but you're living your day to day life, you're not facing them all the time, and here you have to face them. And here, what we see here is we finally understand soccer. I think this was where, if you haven't watched the cartoon, you understand soccer. And with soccer, there's a lot of talk about how his character was watered down. People were expecting a very charming, funny, jovial soccer, but the soccer we got here was very serious. He was very serious. People are like, where's the humor? No humor. And I think it's intentional, because I'm watching it too, and I'm wondering, even though I'm not comparing, I'm wondering, why is this young boy so serious? Like, you're not the first person to be the leader of your community so young. You're not the first person that has to like take care of your tribe. Why are you so uptight? Why are you so like, I don't know, take a chill pill or something? And this is where you develop that sense of compassion, because you see that he felt like he was a disappointment to his dad. The insight into, that memory of how he overheard his father telling this other man that he doesn't really trust that the son can, become what is needed to protect the tribe. Hearing that, I don't know if it would have been easier to hear it face to face, but the father just acted like, he was okay and cool, but then behind him, he said that. So I don't know. Take a step back and just picture yourself in a moment where something very significant, a form of like truth, is hidden from you, but you get to overhear it. And the person that says it never says it to your face, and they instead make you think that you are something that they truly don't think you are. What kind of impact will that have on you? Okay. So that's another thing to get this message in. I think something that's very important is empathy. You need to be able to put yourself in this person's shoes and see how you will feel about that and how that will impact you. And then a lot of things will start to be clear, make sense. And when I saw that, I'm like, okay, I get it now. You're trying to prove to your dad that isn't here to see you that you can actually do this. You are actually the great leader that he didn't think he could be. And that's why you are being overbearing to your sister Katara. You're trying to parent her. You're trying to overassert yourself in circumstances and situations because you feel like you have something to prove. Another person was Katara. Katara, I feel, probably blames herself for the death of her mother because when she bended water under the table when they got attacked by the Fire Nation as a child, the mother had to sacrifice her own life for Katara. And while we are watching the story up until this time, we keep hearing about how the parents died and it was a Fire Nation and blah, but it's not quite personal yet until we see that scene and we see that, oh wow, she blames herself. She feels like it's her fault. Maybe if she was strong enough, she could have done something and killed the Fire Nation people as a child, and she is still young, so obviously there's still that element of blame, self blame, that maybe she could have saved her mother, or maybe if she didn't bend any water at all, they wouldn't have thought there was a bender there, and maybe her mother could have survived. In situations like this, there's so many ways you can think about how it could have gone. And it's very hard to make peace with that. And there's that blame there. We feel a sense of compassion for Katara as well. There are also other emotional themes in the story, like when they were trapped in the tunnels and it was their love, the love of Zuko and Katara, that helped them get out of there. I think in the cartoon it was three people that were involved, and Zuko and Katara, and in the adaptation on Netflix it's just Zuko and Katara. And there are also elements that are different about how the love is not um, is in the cartoon was heterosexual between the original people behind the story of those tunnels, and now it's different, but it's here or there, it doesn't really matter. But it is another emotional dimension that I'm not really covering so much, but worth mentioning. And finally, I want to talk about Zuko. For me, the story, even though it's about the avatar, the people that did it for me were Zuko and his uncle. For me, just seeing them, seeing the depth of their relationship was what made the story for me, and Zuko as well. And I really want to just dedicate this section to him. But before I go into it, I want to mention about Katara. So I've talked about how Sokka is different from the cartoon. Here, Katara is, I'd say her personality type is very explorative. She's open to new experience, she was open, or even the one that initiated, let's go and help Aang, let's leave this water tribe place and help him with his mission. She was the one that was open to welcoming Aang into their tribe, even though Sokka was hesitant. And so she has that openness to experience, and it carries on with her character, at least in this adaptation. So, because she is that way, open to experience, open to new ideas, she learns fast. She learns very, very fast. And so, I know there are people that are going to say that, oh, this is how a lot of all these like movies are that are very like feminist. These women are always somehow just great at doing everything, you know. I'm talking about you, She-Hulk. You know, they're quick to master things, and people have some feelings about that. And I should mention it because people have those feelings about it. But looking at Katara's character in this adaptation, I would argue it's on brand. It's on brand for her. She is teaching herself waterbending, and people would be like, oh, she learned waterbending from the scrolls. It's not how she learned it in the cartoon, but she read and learned. But I think it's on brand with her character because she picks up things quickly. She is open to explore, she's open to experience, you know. So she learns very fast, she's quick, and she she borrows some fighting skills from earthbending from the visit with Bumi, and she adapts it quickly to waterbending. You know, even when she was trapped in the fire in the battle, should I call it a battle or more so a duel with one of the leaders of the water tribe in the north, when she was pushing for the the women to be allowed to fight, she quickly learned that skill from her being trapped in the ice to be able to replicate it to trap Zuko in the ice when she duels him as well with the fight of the Fire Nation towards the end. And so it's on brand for her, at least in this dimension, in this Netflix reality. This is who she is. Now, if for some reason it's not consistent and all of a sudden there are areas where we don't see her as being this open person, then we can raise our eyebrows. But this is just season one, and so I guess all we can do is just watch and see what happens next. So yes, and because of that spirit she has, you know, she wanted to fight, she wanted to push for change, and this openness to change, openness to explore, openness to try new is how she initiated the conversation with the chiefs of the north that women should be allowed to fight. They shouldn't just be healers, they should be allowed to fight as well. So it was definitely giving girl power, and I was here for it. Absolutely. And so back to Zuko. Zuko is different from the cartoons. So Zuko is different from the cartoons. He is less emotional. I felt that in conversations with people in groups, people were a lot disappointed that Zuko wasn't this hot-tempered, fiery person you're used to in the cartoons. And you know, I don't have a problem with that Zuko in the cartoons, but I I'm not mad at this direction that Netflix took because it gives you a different angle of what fire could be. Because philosophically, fire is always seen as uncontrolled, consuming, hot, and just this thing that starts and just keeps going, right? But fire can also be controlled. Fire can also be a cool blue flame. Um, and I think that's the angle, at least with this season, that they are taking Zuko's character. And I like it. He is strong, but he's not flighty and emotional. He's more controlled. There is a respect for order. As I spoke earlier with the themes of order, you see that he has a respect for order. He has this sense of duty. There's this sense for, you know, honor as well, in someone might argue misguided way, because you're like, well, you have all this honor and you have all this stuff, but you're on the bad side. You're on the side of the villains. And I think that level of duality makes me appreciate the character, because a lot of times bad people are not like bad and bad at everything. Okay, you have someone that has a goal that is evil, but there is a level of structure. So they are brilliant, they are smart, they work with precision. They work with merit. They only hire the right people and the best people. And there's this level of like duality there, because like it makes you respect the process. And so there's a lot of respect I would say I personally have for Zuko's current rendition of his character, because he is all of these things, but it's still under the umbrella of the Fire Nation. And he's still fire, and he is still a fire person. And it does make you wonder, like, at his core, what are his personal views of what the Fire Nation is doing? And now we're not talking about the cartoon or what he thinks the personal views are. We're talking about this story and the lines that Netflix might take it in the future. What's his view on it? Does he agree with it deep down that the Fire Nation should be the element that rules every other element? And is it because he believes fire is the best, or he thinks fire has some goals that will be good for everyone? And maybe the way we're going about doing it right now is not ideal. But if everyone can like surrender and not put on a fight, and you just let us fight people rule, and you stop bending and you stop doing all of these things, so we can have that like utopia, and Fire Nation will rule well and do good. I do wonder if that is what he thinks. And I also wonder if it's a case of indoctrination. Like, does he perhaps feel this way because he was born into it and nurtured into the system? He was raised in that society. And so that's why he upholds those Fire Nation values. Um, but then again, there are also themes where you feel like it's very clear that he disagrees with the process. He disagrees with the method they go about it. And when you think about the scene where he was not okay with some of the troops being sacrificed, like their lives had no meaning for the bigger cause of what the Fire Nation is trying to do. And maybe one could argue it's because he's a child, he is looking at it through idealism, and children are always idealistic. They always think, there's a better way where, we don't have to hurt people and still get what we want. Kind of like Aang. And if you look at it that way, that idealism in him and Aang both share it. They're like two sides of the same coin. They both share that idealism, and his father rejects him because of that objection. And it was interesting because, again, we see that element of order and we see that element of code, because he felt like his son spoke out of turn by rejecting the idea of a general. And by rejecting the idea of the general, he's rejecting his father's idea, because his father put the general in charge. And so I thought that was interesting. Like, even if maybe your idea, you could come up with a better idea, you don't have the right to disrespect the person that comes before you, the person I have put in charge that answers to me, therefore disrespecting me because there's a code. There's a way things are done here, and you do not go against that. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was interesting to see. And so, I feel like at this point that Zuko does not share the same values with regards to how this Fire Nation goes about doing its thing. Even when that general tried to, collaborate with him to trap the Avatar, before he went on his own evil plans, Zuko was still resistant to doing certain shady things. Zuko also wasn't okay with like hiring mercenaries to go and find the avatar for him because he wants to find the avatar himself. So there is still that code of it's not the ends that justify the means. It's not just about getting him and winning. It's not just about winning, it's how you win. And that element of his character, I can respect. I can respect that. Finally, I want to talk about Zuko and his dad's relationship. I do believe that Zuko's dad is a psychopath. The word, the word I'm trying to say, it rhymes with psychopath, but I can't say the word because I don't know if YouTube will ban this video. And there is this illusion that people have that Zuko, at least the Zuko in the movie, not the cartoon, is the favorite of the father. And I don't believe that because the dad is an psychopath and everything he does is to fulfill his goal. And he uses anyone and any means to make that happen. He has no favorites. And we see that at the end of the season when he finds out that that other general had been in cahoots with his sister and his father has pretty much been using him to sharpen his sister's will, Azula. So Azula is also another character I think Netflix is going to go down the path of strong female character in the story, maybe feminism things. But she is also a strong character in the cartoon, so it's not a deviation from the actual story itself. But him finding out that he is doing all this, spending all these years on exile, trying to find the avatar, truly sincerely hopeful that when he gets him and he comes home, he'll be allowed to come home and he will truly find favor in his father's eyes. Finding out that that will never happen was kind of soul crushing. Finding that there is no such thing as favor, there's no such thing as now being the number one, there's no such thing as earning your father's love and approval because the goalposts will always shift depending on whatever it needs to be. If it means you're now up against Azula and you have to prove yourself, or something else will always come up. And it just takes you to the dynamics of toxic families, whether it is psychopathy or narcissism. There is that level of triangulation among the children competing with each other, and the parents setting it up in such a way that they're playing favorites, and the children really think they're working towards something, but they're not. They're fulfilling the aims and the goals of the person that is manipulating the whole thing. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't think that this iteration of Zuko or this iteration of his father has any favorites. There's no favorites. You're good for the moment that you're serving your purpose and doing what is in line with the goal and the aim he's trying to fulfill. And it's very clear he doesn't even love the child when he hears that his son could have died in the Fire Nation battle at the north, with the water bender tribe at the north. And he says, oh well, sometimes you have to sacrifice the weak. There is no compassion, there's no thought of, oh, I lost my son, or there's nothing there, there's no emotion. Well, one soldier died, another one, and I guess if he died, he's not even worthy of being my son, because I wouldn't have a kid that would actually die and just be weak. Who says that? Who says that about a child they love? So yeah, finally, I just want to say that I like the Zuko. I prefer him to the cartoon. I don't know what they're going to do with his character going forward. I think there's going to be 2 more seasons and then the show will be cancelled. I think At least that's what I've seen in the latest publications in the media, and so we will see. But this Zuko gives off an anti hero vibe that I quite like because I am usually a fan of the anti heroes in stories, and I can't help but empathize with his character. Um, he's just a poor boy forever seeking the validation of his father he would never get. And at his core, he seems like a good person, especially the fact that he took those soldiers that his father wanted to kill and he took them out with him, and he never revealed to them that he saved their lives. It took Uncle Iroh telling the story of how they were finally set at sea to go on the mission and how they owe him their lives because they all would have been dead. But he never said that. He's the kind of guy that would save your life and or do something for you and not tell you he did anything. Just quietly do things and go about their business. And I have that kind of respect for his character. There's just a lot to respect about him. So, without saying too much, he is my favorite character in this rendition. And so, I think I've come to the end. This was a long analysis. And just to recap the things I covered, I talked about the philosophical dimensions and how this story was really a philosophical lens that was used to describe things that we experience in life, what it means to be the avatar. Um, we had some emotional themes. I talked about Iroh and Zuko's relationship and Gangiatsu's relationship. I talked about the exploration of past traumas. And I finally talked about the humanization of Zuko. If I was to summarize this story in one paragraph or a sentence, I would say it's a philosophical story. There's a lot of talking, more talking, less fighting. If you don't like that, you will not like this. It's like those animes where there's a lot of talking, like Attack of Titans, what it means to exist, what it means to survive, what it means to fight, and then some fight scenes, and then a lot more talking. So more talking, less fighting, you won't like the story. Another thing is it is also, again, all those philosophical themes I talked about, responsibility, what's right, what's wrong. It's just a bunch of old people, and these old people are people like Bumi, previous dead avatars, leaders of communities, different tribes, water tribe, earth tribe, you know, different people telling him what it means to be the avatar. And I think the purpose of the story is to reveal to us how Aang takes on that mantle and how he accepts that responsibility and defines for himself the avatar he is going to be. And so, come to the end of this analysis. I hope I did not bore you. I hope I was able to keep you. And I would like for you to be able to do other things as you listen to this, drive, do your workouts, cook a meal, take a shower. You don't have to be tied to your device. My face is not that interesting. But I guess I'll see you in my next video, and it's likely going to be a live, and so I can't wait to see you then. I love you. Love yourselves too. Bye.